She didn't buy treasure. She bought a truck full of abandoned luggage, unclaimed, forgotten, and left to rot in a dusty warehouse. But what Grace found inside wasn't just clothes or souvenirs. She uncovered a life-changing secret sealed inside one suitcase. And by the time she opened the last bag, she was in tears, and so were millions of others. This is more than just a mystery. It's an emotional discovery that will restore your faith in people, in memory, in everything we leave behind. Stay with us because the hidden story you're about to hear might change you too. But before we dive in, tell us, where are you watching from? We love seeing our global family in the comments. Let's get started. It was a cold December morning in upstate Oregon when Grace stood in the snow-covered driveway, staring at the massive delivery truck pulling up to her home. Her breath came out in clouds, hands trembling not from the cold, but from the weight of what she had just done. 3 weeks earlier, she had stumbled across an online auction for unclaimed airport luggage. With barely $800 in her account and Christmas around the corner, she made a decision that felt crazy, maybe even reckless. She placed a bid on an entire truckload of abandoned suitcases. Why? Because after losing her job at the local bakery and with 2 young kids to feed, Grace had run out of traditional options. The mortgage was 3 months overdue. The thought of telling her children there would be no gifts this year made her stomach twist. This truck was her last desperate gamble. As the back of the truck creaked open, revealing towers of mismatched luggage, she whispered a prayer under her breath. Please, let something in here be worth it. She didn't know it yet, but hidden inside those forgotten bags was a story, no, a secret that would change everything. The truck doors groaned as they swung open, revealing a chaotic mountain of luggage stacked nearly to the ceiling. Some suitcases were tattered and duct-taped. Others looked untouched, still gleaming beneath layers of dust. Grace felt a lump rise in her throat. What had she done? Her neighbor, Jason, had come over to help. A kind man in his late 50s who had lived next door for years. He stood beside her, shaking his head with a half smile. You sure you didn't just buy someone's entire life? Grace, he joked gently. She forced a laugh, but inside, she was already second-guessing everything. They started with a medium-sized navy roller bag near the back. The zipper was stuck. Jason had to yank it open with a screwdriver. Inside, dirty gym clothes, half-used toiletries, and a broken pair of headphones. Grace sighed. She tossed the bag aside. The second one, a floral pink suitcase, seemed promising. It opened easily, revealing a folded-up blanket, some costume jewelry, and a box of postcards, all unsent. She paused to glance through them. Each one had a beautiful photo on the front, but nothing written on the back. Odd, she murmured, like someone was planning to say something, but never got the chance. Hours passed. Bag after bag, suitcase after suitcase. Some were filled with crumpled clothes. One had only a single shoe and a rotten apple core. Another had a half-melted snow globe and a faded boarding pass from 2007. It was like trying to piece together fragments of lives that had been forgotten. Grace was exhausted. The sun had started to dip, casting golden light over the driveway. Her kids, Mia and Caleb, peeked out the window, hopeful but confused. She gave them a weak thumbs up. Last one for the day, Jason said, wiping sweat from his brow. He rolled out a hard-shell gray suitcase, slightly heavier than the rest. Let's hope this one's got gold bars in it. Grace smiled faintly and knelt beside the case. She flipped the latches open and slowly lifted the lid. Inside was strange. Neatly folded clothes. Yes, but tucked in between them were more curious items. An old camera. Vintage and surprisingly well-preserved. A silk scarf embroidered with the name Lena, a leather-bound journal with a lock, the key taped to the inside. Grace's hands trembled as she picked up the journal and unlocked it. The first page was a letter. "If you found this, I hope you're someone kind. I never meant to leave this behind. But maybe it's better this way. Maybe some stories are meant to be discovered, not told." Grace froze. She glanced at Jason, then back at the journal. What followed was a detailed account somewhere between a diary and a confession. Lena, the owner of the suitcase, had been a flight attendant. She had traveled constantly, drifting between cities and hotel rooms, but it was clear through her writing that she was running from something or someone. The entries were raw. Lena wrote about falling in love with a passenger who flew often between Seattle and New York, a man named Thomas. They had a secret affair for almost a year. Then suddenly, he stopped flying, vanished. She looked for him, hoped he'd show up again on one of her flights. But he never did. Lena described her heartbreak in vivid, painful detail. Her writing carried grief, but also hints of guilt. One entry ended with, "I should have told him the truth about the baby." Grace's heart stopped. She turned the page empty. The rest of the journal was blank. For a long moment, there was only silence between her and Jason. "This isn't just forgotten luggage," Grace whispered. "This was someone's life, someone's secret." She sat back, overwhelmed. The emotional weight was crushing. She'd thought she was opening old bags to find trinkets, maybe things she could sell. She never imagined stumbling into the middle of someone's unresolved love story, someone's pain. Jason knelt beside her, voice quiet. "You okay?" Grace nodded. "Barely. I don't know what I expected, but not this." That night, after tucking in the kids, Grace sat at the kitchen table, the journal spread open beside her. She ran her fingers over the name Lena, wondering who she was, where she ended up, and if she ever found peace. She looked up Lena's name online. Flight records, lost property claims, anything. But it was like Lena had vanished too, just like Thomas. The mystery gnawed at her. But there was something else rising beneath it, a shift in how she viewed what she was doing. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about stories, lives, people. Suitcases weren't just bags, they were time capsules. Each zipper unsealed a memory someone once packed carefully, intending to return. The next morning, Grace woke up with new resolve. She would document each bag, tell each story, not just for herself, but for whoever might be watching. She set up her old phone on a stand, hit record, and began speaking. "Hi. My name is Grace. I bought a truckload of lost luggage. I did it because I was desperate. But what I found, what I keep finding, is something I never expected. These aren't just things. These are pieces of people's lives, forgotten by the world, but not forgotten by me, in a single night." Grace's video received thousands of views. Comments flooded in. People were moved. Some even claimed to recognize items from long-lost trips. Others encouraged her to keep going, saying her story gave them hope. And so she did. Each day, Grace unpacked another bag. With every suitcase came more questions, more heartaches, more surprises. One day, it was a wedding dress stained with tears. Another, a letter never sent. One even had a box of baby clothes wrapped in tissue, with a name tag that read, Ella, 2003. The truck that once symbolized desperation had become something else entirely, a vessel of connection. A mirror reflecting lives once full of motion. Now paused in her driveway. And for the first time in months, Grace didn't feel alone. She felt part of something bigger. She didn't know what the next suitcase would hold, but she couldn't wait to find out. Because in that mountain of forgotten bags there was magic, pain, yes, but also beauty. And every story deserved to be told, even the ones packed away and left behind. It had been nearly 2 weeks since Grace first opened that truck. Her garage was now a makeshift archive of forgotten memories, luggage stacked like miniature tombstones of stories left untold. She had already unpacked over 50 bags. Some contents were heartbreaking, some mundane, and a few surprisingly valuable, like the designer coat she sold for enough to cover her overdue electric bill. But none of it compared to what she was about to find next. It was a Sunday afternoon, crisp and gray, when she pulled out a dusty olive green suitcase. This one was different, heavier than most. The handle had been reinforced with twine, and it rattled faintly when she moved it. There were faded stickers on the sides: Greece, Tokyo, Johannesburg. Whoever owned this case had seen the world. Grace rolled it into her living room. Her phone was already set up, recording. The kids were at a friend's house, and she had a cup of chamomile tea cooling beside her. With a deep breath, she knelt down and unzipped the case. Inside, the top layer revealed men's clothing, well-made, pressed, and folded with care. Beneath them, a small velvet bag tied with a golden ribbon caught her eye. She opened it and gasped. Inside were several military medals, perfectly preserved. Navy, she thought, judging by the anchor insignia. She held one up to the light. It was engraved with the name Whitmore. Grace felt a shiver ripple up her spine. She set the medals aside gently and continued digging. Then she found the box. A small wooden box with intricate carvings. It was locked, but the key was taped to the bottom of the suitcase lid. Her hands trembled as she fit the key into place. The lock clicked open. Inside the box was a folded envelope with a yellowed photograph resting on top. The photo showed a young woman holding a baby, standing beside a man in a crisp navy uniform. The back was marked with a date, May 12, 1974. The envelope, addressed simply to my daughter, was sealed. For a long moment, Grace just stared at it. She wasn't sure why she hesitated. Maybe it was the weight of the moment. The intimacy of opening a letter never meant for her. But curiosity and something deeper won out. She opened the envelope. To my daughter. If you're reading this, then this suitcase somehow made its way back to you. I hope that means you're safe, and that the world has been kinder to you than it was to me. There were things I couldn't explain, things I kept from you, not because I didn't love you, but because I loved you too much to make you carry my mistakes. I served my country, but I lost pieces of myself along the way. Your mother, she was the only thing that ever brought me peace. When she passed, I didn't know how to keep going. I couldn't raise you alone, so I left you with your aunt. I told myself it was for the best. I followed every one of your birthdays from afar, sent money, watched from the shadows. I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to come home. Maybe one day you'll understand. Maybe you won't. But know this, you were always my greatest gift. Dad? Grace blinked back tears. Her hands were shaking so badly. She nearly dropped the letter. She looked again at the medals, the photo, the date. It was a lifetime ago. A man torn apart by grief and guilt, who never stopped loving his daughter but disappeared from her life entirely. She couldn't stop imagining the woman that letter was meant for. Had she ever received it? Had she grown up wondering why he left? Was she even still alive? Grace knew what she had to do. She ended the video there and posted it with the title, "The Most Emotional Discovery." Yet a father's lost letter. The response was overwhelming. The video was shared thousands of times. Comments poured in from viewers offering insight, expressing heartbreak, and even suggesting how to track down Lauder, Whitmore's family. Within 24 hours, something miraculous happened. A message appeared in Grace's inbox from a woman named Elizabeth Carter. She wrote, "Hi, Grace. I'm not sure how to say this, but I believe the letter in your video was written by my grandfather. His name was Charles Whitmore. He served in the Navy. My mother's name was Lily Whitmore. She passed away in 2015. She never knew what happened to her father. She always said it felt like part of her was missing. Watching your video, I just started crying. I think you found him." Grace sat frozen at her kitchen table, hand over her mouth. She responded immediately, attaching photos of everything she had found: medals, photo, letter. The two women spoke later that night via video call. Elizabeth was in her early 30s, a schoolteacher from Ohio. She had her mother's eyes, Grace thought. The conversation lasted hours. They cried together, laughed in between. And by the end, Grace asked if she could send the suitcase and everything in it to her. "I think they've waited long enough to go home," she said softly. Elizabeth agreed. A week later, Grace shipped the suitcase, carefully wrapped, with love and reverence to the Whitmore family. She included a personal letter of her own, expressing how deeply the story had touched her. And then something unexpected happened again. A local news outlet picked up the story. Then a national one. Suddenly, Grace was receiving interview requests, not because she had uncovered gold or treasure, but because she had reunited a family, because she had dared to look inside the forgotten and found something unforgettable. Her YouTube channel exploded, but more importantly, her heart felt full. She had started this journey searching for a way to survive. Now, she felt like she was part of something sacred, a healer of histories, a connector of past and present. And all because she opened one suitcase? After the Whitmore story went viral, everything changed. Grace couldn't walk into her small-town grocery store without someone stopping her to say, "You made me cry," or "That letter reminded me of my dad." Her videos were no longer about rummaging through lost luggage for forgotten treasures. They had become something deeper, and so had she. In the beginning, she had opened those bags with desperation. Her only goal had been to scrape together enough value to keep the lights on, to buy her kids gifts, to avoid foreclosure. But now, as she sat at her dining table each evening, her mindset had shifted. She wasn't just opening suitcases. She was uncovering fragments of human lives, raw, messy, beautiful lives that had been packed away, never meant to be found by strangers. And yet here she was, the accidental guardian of their memories. It hit her one night while holding a tiny stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. The suitcase it came from had been filled mostly with baby items, a tiny pair of shoes, a faded blanket that once might have been pink, a hospital bracelet with the name Ella James. 2003. There were no photos, no clothes for anyone older than 6 months. Just that rabbit lovingly worn, clearly important. Grace sat in silence for a long time, holding the little toy in her lap. She wasn't sure what hurt more, the thought of someone losing that suitcase, or the idea that maybe someone had left it behind on purpose. That night, she didn't post a video. Instead, she wrote in her journal a habit she'd picked up from Lena's locked diary in the earlier suitcase. "I used to think the worst part of poverty was not having enough, but it's not. It's feeling invisible, forgotten, like no one would care if you disappeared. And now here I am, sitting in a room full of forgotten things, and I care more than I thought I would." The next morning, she recorded a different kind of video. She sat in front of the camera. No makeup, no suitcase in sight. "Hey everyone! I know I usually start these with a new bag and a lot of curiosity, but today, I just want to talk. about what this has turned into, about what it's doing to me. Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept going. I didn't expect to feel this much. I didn't expect to cry this much. But the truth is, every suitcase I open feels like I'm opening a life that never got closure. And maybe that's something we all need. Closure. So if you've ever lost something, or someone, I hope these stories help you feel less alone. The video struck a chord. Her comment section filled with people pouring out their own stories, lost relatives, childhood toys never recovered, parents who left without saying goodbye. Some even messaged her privately, asking if she had found items with names they recognized. A few begged her to check for a particular color bag or a sticker from a certain airport. Grace realized she had become a kind of emotional detective, not just unlocking zippers, but unlocking hearts. One afternoon, she received a letter in the mail, handwritten, addressed to her P.O. box. Inside was a note. Dear Grace, I watched your video about the baby suitcase. I think it might belong to my sister. She lost her baby in 2003, a girl, stillborn. She never really talked about it. But I remember that rabbit. I remember the shoes. She carried them everywhere for a while, until one day, they were just gone. I think she left them at the airport when she moved to Arizona. She was trying to start over. Could I ask, if you'd be willing to send it, I think it would mean a lot to her. Sincerely, but Maria Thomas. Grace's hands trembled as she read. The rabbit, the shoes, Ella. She found the suitcase and packed it with the same care she'd give to something sacred. She included a note of her own, just like she had with the Whitmore family. She mailed it off the next morning. That night, Grace sat on the porch with a blanket draped over her shoulders, watching snow drift across the lawn. Her daughter Mia came out and curled up beside her. Did you find anything cool today? Mia asked sleepily. Grace thought for a moment. Not cool, but important. Are you going to keep doing it? I think I have to, Grace said, smiling, as long as there are stories left to find. And she did keep going. Each bag brought a new shift, a new window into lives she'd never met but somehow understood. There was the suitcase filled with Polaroids of a woman traveling solo across Europe in the 80s, every photo captioned in her handwriting. Another bag held a wedding guest book, signed by hundreds of names, but with no bride or groom's name inside. One had a violin inside, snapped in half, along with a letter written in Italian, a love letter, the ink smudged with what looked like tears. Every item forced Grace to slow down, to feel, and slowly, she realized she was changing. She was no longer the woman who sat crying over bills and bidding on a truckload of luggage out of panic. She was someone with purpose now, not because she had found riches, but because she had found meaning. In a world obsessed with throwing things away, she was salvaging what mattered. In a world where people forgot, she remembered. And perhaps, in honoring the forgotten, she was also healing something inside herself. One of her subscribers left a comment that stayed with her for days. Grace, I lost my mother to cancer last year. I've been numb ever since. But watching you cry over someone else's baby blanket made me feel something again. Thank you for reminding me how to feel. That was the moment Grace knew this wasn't just a project anymore. This was her calling. The first check came from YouTube, $327.12. It wasn't much, but Grace stared at it like it was a lottery ticket. Not because of the number, but because of what it meant. It meant someone had watched, someone had listened. Her story, her tears, her hours spent unpacking strangers' forgotten luggage, they mattered. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. Over the next few weeks, everything started moving faster than Grace could have imagined. Subscribers poured in by the thousands. Brands began reaching out, mostly irrelevant ones at first: phone case companies, energy drinks, even a pet costume brand. She laughed, shook her head, and politely declined. But then came an email from a nonprofit called Restored Pieces, an organization that worked to reunite lost items from airports and train stations with their rightful owners. The message was short, but sincere.
Dear Grace,
we've been watching your series. What you're doing is beautiful and needed. Would you be open to collaborating? Maybe even traveling to our facility? We think you'd be perfect for a new project. Grace reread it 3 times. Then she burst into tears. She hadn't traveled farther than Portland in nearly a decade. The idea of flying somewhere, staying in a hotel, meeting strangers as a content creator felt surreal. But she said yes. Her kids, Mia and Caleb, stood with her at the airport, clutching her hands as they waited for her to go through security. "Will you be back before Saturday?" Caleb asked. "I promise," she said, "and I'll bring souvenirs." Jason, her kind neighbor, and now close friend, had offered to watch the kids. He'd become a sort of honorary uncle since the journey began, always showing up with boxes of hot cocoa or batteries for her camera light. As the plane lifted off, Grace stared out the window at the clouds and thought back to that first freezing morning, standing in the driveway with a truck full of forgotten baggage. Now she was flying toward a future she never expected. The facility was in Denver, a massive warehouse filled with items lost all over the country: phones, wallets, backpacks, and of course hundreds of suitcases. When Grace arrived, she was greeted by Elena, the nonprofit's project director, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a calm, commanding presence. "We've been following your videos," Elena said. "You don't just unpack luggage, you unpack humanity. We want to launch a new series, a partnership with travel companies, airports, even Amtrak. The goal is to track down people connected to long-lost items. Would you be willing to host it?" Grace blinked. "Like, on camera?" "Yes." Elena smiled. "You'd be the face of it." Grace's first instinct was to say no. She wasn't glamorous, or young, or media-trained. She was just a single mom with too many bills and a shaky internet connection. But then she remembered that stuffed rabbit, the Whitmore letter, Lena's journal. This wasn't about her. This was about stories that needed to be heard. They filmed the pilot episode that weekend. The item was a vintage Nikon camera, found at a bus depot in Kansas. Inside was a roll of undeveloped film. Grace held the camera with reverence. Someone captured memories on this, and never got to see them. They developed the film. The photos were faded but full of life, an older man and woman laughing in front of national landmarks: the Grand Canyon, Niagara Falls, the Golden Gate Bridge. With the help of their community, they traced the images to a couple named Howard and Miriam Patel, who had both passed away in 2018. But their granddaughter, Sasha, was still alive and had never seen those photos. When Grace placed the camera in Sasha's hands, the young woman broke down, sobbing. "They used to talk about that trip all the time," she whispered. "But they lost the camera before they got home. We never had photos." Grace held her as she cried, and the moment went viral. Back home in Oregon, Grace's life was transforming. With her growing income, she was able to finally pay off her debt. She fixed the leaky roof. She bought Mia a new winter coat and signed Caleb up for soccer. But more than that, she had hope again. People from all over the world began sending her their own lost stories luggage that vanished during moves, love letters that never arrived, old journals found at thrift stores. It became a movement. She launched a second channel called Baggage Claimed, focused solely on the emotional reunions and background stories behind the objects. And her favorite part, she hired 2 local single moms to help her edit and film. Grace hadn't just found opportunity, she was creating it. One evening, while sorting through the last few pieces from the original truck, She found something she hadn't expected, a small, rusted key taped to the underside of a suitcase. There was no explanation, no note, just a number etched into the side, 313. She felt a chill, like the universe was reminding her this journey wasn't over. Later, she posted a video titled, "The Forgotten Key, What Door Does It Open?" It sparked theories, comments, even national attention. Some thought it belonged to a locker in a train station. Others suggested a safety deposit box. Grace didn't know yet, but she knew she had to find out, because the world had given her a second chance. And she owed it to every abandoned story, every hidden truth, every lost soul waiting quietly in the dark. From a truckload of suitcases to a life rebuilt on storytelling, Grace had discovered something extraordinary. That even in the forgotten, there's always something worth remembering. Snow fell softly outside the window as Grace sat by the fireplace, hands curled around a chipped mug of tea. The kids were asleep. The house was quiet, warm, safe, 3 things it hadn't been just a year ago. But tonight, her heart felt heavy. Earlier that day, she had opened a suitcase unlike any other, one she had almost overlooked. It was an old leather case, scuffed and stained, with fraying edges and a broken buckle. She hadn't planned to open it on camera. She just wanted a quiet day. But something about the weight of it, the silence it carried, pulled at her. And so she hit record. Inside was only one thing, a wooden box, tied with a red ribbon. No clothes, no photos, no paperwork, just the box. She unwrapped the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside were ashes. Human ashes. Her breath caught in her chest. At the bottom of the box was a note, handwritten, delicate from age. "This is my father. Please scatter his ashes in the ocean. He always said the sea made him feel free." "Lily M." Grace's hand flew to her mouth, her vision blurred. Who was Lily? Where was she now? Did she think the ashes had been scattered years ago? Did she know they had been lost? She turned off the camera. For the next hour, Grace sat motionless, holding the box on her lap like it was sacred, like she was afraid to even breathe. And then, as if pulled by something greater than herself, she whispered, "I'll take him to the sea." That night, after the kids were tucked in, she began her search. There were dozens of Lily M's in the U.S. She searched airline records, Facebook pages, even obituary archives. Nothing conclusive. Some women had passed, others were too young. She posted a short video, no music, no frills explaining what she found and what she intended to do. Her voice was shaky, but firm. "If you're out there, Lily, I have him. I don't know how, or why, or when this suitcase got lost. But I promise you, I'll honor his last wish. He'll see the ocean." The comments were unlike anything she had seen. One read, "I lost my father too. I never got to say goodbye. Watching you hold that box, I sobbed. You're not just telling stories. Grace, you're healing people." A week later, Grace and her children stood on the edge of the Oregon coast. The sun was setting, casting the waves in gold. Caleb held her hand. Mia clutched a seashell to her chest, one she said she wanted to give to the man going home. Grace knelt in the sand. She opened the box, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "To the man who loved the ocean, I don't know your name. I don't know your story. But I know someone loved you enough to carry you in her suitcase, hoping to finish your journey. I hope you feel free now." The wind picked up as she scattered the ashes into the sea. They danced like snowflakes on the breeze, then disappeared into the waves. Mia whispered, "He's flying!" And for the first time, Grace felt peace. That moment, raw, deeply personal, and profoundly human became the most watched video on her channel. Not because it was viral, but because it was real. People messaged her from around the world, veterans, widows, daughters who never got to say goodbye to their fathers, strangers who never felt seen until that video. It wasn't just content, it was catharsis. Grace knew then that she was no longer the same woman who had opened that first suitcase out of desperation. That woman had been scared, cornered by circumstance, grasping at anything to survive. But now she was a bridge between the forgotten and the remembered, a voice for stories that would have faded into dust, a mother who taught her children not just how to live, but how to feel. One rainy evening, as she tucked Mia into bed, her daughter asked, "Mommy, do you think you'll run out of suitcases one day?" Grace smiled gently. "Maybe. But stories, I don't think we'll ever run out of those." Mia paused, thoughtful. "Can I tell stories like you when I grow up?" Grace kissed her forehead. "You already do." There was one final moment that sealed her transformation. Weeks later, she received a letter. Not an email, not a DM. A real letter. "Grace, my name is Lily Morgan. I saw your video. I didn't think anyone would ever find my father. I'd packed him carefully. I meant to scatter him myself. But the airline lost my bag. I cried for months, thinking I had failed him. But you gave him peace. You gave me peace. Thank you for doing what I couldn't. He loved the ocean. He would have loved you too. With all my heart." Lily. Grace held the letter to her chest and wept. For Lily. For the man she never met. For the version of herself that had once been lost, too. She didn't set out to change lives. She just opened a suitcase. But in doing so, she had discovered the most beautiful truth of all. Sometimes, the things we think are lost are only waiting to be found. The last suitcase sat quietly in the corner of Grace's garage. It was smaller than the others, almost unnoticeable. A deep burgundy leather with worn handles and a brass tag that read simply, "To Home." It had been there from the very beginning, one of the first off the truck, but for some reason, Grace had never opened it. Maybe she'd overlooked it. Or maybe deep down, something told her it needed to be opened last. She stood in the garage alone. The kids were at school. Snow was gently falling outside. Her hands rested on the suitcase for a moment longer than usual. She took a breath and unzipped it. Inside were things that didn't shine. Nothing flashy, no electronics, no jewelry, just life. A tattered scarf. A music box that still played, barely. A notebook filled with recipes written in looping, loving cursive. Each page had a smudge, a fingerprint flower, and memories pressed into every word. At the bottom was a sealed envelope. Not addressed to anyone in particular. Just 3 words on the front. "If you're listening." Grace sat down on the concrete floor, hands trembling, and opened it. If you're listening, then maybe you believe in something more. Maybe you're someone who looks at a forgotten thing and sees worth in it. If so, thank you. My name doesn't matter. My story isn't heroic. I didn't fight in a war. I didn't save a life. But I lived, and that has to count for something. I loved fiercely. I made mistakes. I lost people. I danced in the kitchen and cried in my car. I wrote poems I never shared. I forgave too slowly and held on too long. But I tried. I really tried. And if you found this suitcase, then maybe you're someone who understands that even the smallest pieces of us deserve to be remembered. So I'm asking you, whoever you are, not to forget me. Not because I was special, but because I was real. And in a world that moves so fast, being remembered, that's the most beautiful thing of all. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing me. Someone who was here. Grace wiped her face with her sleeve. She hadn't even noticed the tears falling. This wasn't a mystery to solve. There was no owner to track down, no family to return it to. This was simply a goodbye, but one that demanded to be heard. Later that night, she lit a candle. She sat with that letter in her lap and hit record one more time. Her voice was soft, steadier than she expected. I don't know who packed this suitcase. I don't know where they came from, or where they were going. But I know this. They mattered. And so do you. She held the letter up, tears brimming in her eyes. If you're listening, if you feel invisible, lost, or forgotten, I want you to know that you are not alone. You don't need to be famous. You don't need to be extraordinary. You just need to be, and that's enough. She paused. I started this journey thinking I was just unpacking luggage. But what I found were pieces of love, of grief, of joy, of humanity. And somewhere in between those broken zippers and folded letters, I found myself. The video went viral overnight. Not for the views, not for the likes, but because it made people feel something. People who had never commented before typed, I needed this today. Others wrote, this made me call my mom. This made me open that box I've been avoiding. This reminded me that I matter. It became more than a video. It became a moment. Months passed. Grace continued sharing stories, but now, people began sending her theirs. Suitcases arrived at her doorstep from strangers across the country, items that had meaning, but no one left to hold them. Stories begging for a voice. She built a small team, rented a studio space downtown, started a foundation called Remembered, its mission to preserve stories that would otherwise fade. She wasn't rich, she wasn't perfect, but she had purpose. And more importantly, she had peace. On the 1-year anniversary of the truck's arrival, Grace and her kids stood in the driveway. Same spot, same time of year, but everything had changed. She looked at Mia and Caleb, now taller, brighter, more confident. She looked at herself, and she smiled. We thought we were opening suitcases, she whispered to them. But really, we were opening hearts. In the end, it wasn't about what was inside the bags. It was about what they unlocked in her, and in us. Because sometimes, the most beautiful stories are the ones that were almost forgotten, but weren't. What began as a desperate attempt to survive turned into the most meaningful journey of Grace's life. She didn't find treasure in the traditional sense. There were no gold bars or million-dollar paintings. But what she uncovered was far more powerful forgotten memories, untold stories, unspoken love, and unfinished goodbyes. And in the process of piecing together strangers' lives, she rediscovered her own. The truth is, we all carry baggage, some seen, some hidden. We all leave things behind, people we've lost, versions of ourselves we abandoned, words we never got to say. But every one of those pieces matters. Every story, no matter how small, deserves to be remembered. Grace's story reminds us that you don't need a perfect life to make a difference. You just need a heart that's willing to listen, a soul willing to see what others overlook. Because sometimes, the most beautiful stories are the ones we almost lost. The end. Up next, 2 more true stories that will move your heart. Click to continue the journey, and hit subscribe if you believe every life deserves to be remembered.